I just passed my 5-year anniversary of moving to Scotland, so I thought it would be fun to do a little Q&A about what it was like to move here and what it's like to live here, based on all the questions you've been sending me over the last few months. And if you don't know, I'm an artist and photographer living in the Highlands of Scotland, sharing my journey month by month on this channel. Hello and welcome to my studio, my tiny little office. Yes, I know there's a big microphone in front of my face, but it's going to make recording the audio for this a lot better than just my camera. And I'm going to break this Q&A up into 3 sections. The first one is how and why did you move to Scotland? The second one is going to be what is it like to live in Scotland? And the third one is more related to my business and personal stuff. So a couple stats before we get started. I'm 37. I moved here in 2017. Well, I kind of started the visa process. I'll explain it later. My husband is Scottish. We live in the countryside in Murray County. We have 2 kitties. And I'm a self-employed artist. I'm a photographer. I teach online a lot. And I think that's it. There are a lot of questions, so we're just going to jump right in. First question, why did you choose Scotland? Did you research other countries to live in first? This was from a couple people. So I did post a video about why I'm in Scotland, but the TLDR or TLDW version of this is that Wolfie, my husband, or Sean, I guess I'll tell you his real name, is Scottish. Each of us is a citizen in either the US or Scotland, so we chose between that because it would just be easier than trying to figure out where else to live. Secondly, I am self-employed, so it's a lot easier for me to move to another country, than it was for him to leave his job or find a new job or something. Plus, I am just completely head over heels in love with Scotland. And so it was a really easy choice for me, and all of that combined just made it easy for us to choose Scotland. Sarah Raw86 asks, do you see yourself staying in Scotland long-term or moving back to the USA? Yeah, we see ourselves here in Scotland long-term for as long as it suits us. We both would love to someday kind of explore the US more because there's a lot I have never seen. Even though I lived there, I haven't seen a lot of the amazing national parks. One of my huge bucket list things is to go to the Sequoia National Forest to see the giant redwoods. I mean, that's really high on my list. There's a lot we haven't seen. Plus, we have talked about how someday when my parents are elderly and need someone to take care of them, I'm going to be there for them. So and the same for Sean. When his parents are elderly, he might have to help them a lot. So if those years overlap, we might be living in different countries for a little while just because of the logistics of taking care of our parents. And that's okay because we're very open-minded. We're very strong individuals. Like we've dealt with the long distance thing before and we could do it again. It's not ideal, obviously, but we're completely open-minded. But right now, for as long as I can foresee, I love the idea of living here. Down the road, maybe in a few years, we might want to go do like some van life exploring in the US. And, obviously I would make videos and make art from that experience and visit my family for longer than 2 weeks. We both like both countries in different ways, so it's exciting to do new things and explore new things together. A couple people have asked, since it's my 5-year anniversary, does this mean I can apply for citizenship now? Not yet. It's very complicated. I'll try to explain it as best as I can, because the next question is, what does the whole process of moving to Scotland from the US involve as far as legalities? And I just want to throw this out there. I am not an expert at immigration or anything related to this. I just know from my own personal experience what I went through, and so that's what I'll share. You need to seek out your own legal advice if you're doing this. And all of this depends on what type of visa you're going to go for. I was going for the spouse visa, the family route, but there's like job visas, there's all different kinds. So for my visa, there are a lot of parts to it and it takes a long time. So once I met Sean and we did the long distance thing for a while and we realized we're in love, we want to live together, we want to be together, that's when we had to kind of take a leap of faith. Because yes, we could have done long distance for a lot longer, but I could only be here for 6 months at a time on a visitor visa, and it's not much different in the US. So it would have been like short chunks of time visiting each other for a long time, and it is insanely expensive and heartbreaking when you're not together. And we just knew we wanted to be together. And during one of the 6 month periods of time that I was here, Sean proposed to me. And that kind of got the ball rolling. So we looked into the visa process and realized I have to be back in the United States, or at least outside of the UK, to apply for the first part, which is the fiance visa. It's very expensive. Tons of documents are required. You have to prove you're in a genuine relationship, which requires you to have like documents, letters to each other, texts and phone calls and all of this stuff. And we have to write like a heartfelt letter that expresses why we love each other. It's actually really invasive, and it was extremely stressful. And we were apart at that time, so it was even harder. But we did hire a visa expert, a lawyer to help us through that process because it was so new. After we got the fiance visa, I was allowed to move here technically. And that was with some stipulations. It meant that within a certain amount of time of moving here, we had to get married. So we had to prove we got married, which, by the way, is extremely difficult because, you're waiting for this fiance visa to move here. You have to start planning your wedding before that. What if you don't get the visa or it gets delayed? All of the plans could change, but it's all good. It worked out. And then we were allowed to apply for my residency permit. And it's kind of like the marriage visa. So we're married, we prove we're married, we show the documents, we give all these other documents and prove we're still together. Of course, we're living together. Pay a lot of money. By now, it's like thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds altogether. But that's my residency permit. I have it in my hand. It lasts for 2.5 years. After that 2.5 years, I had to apply to renew it, kind of. And that's more money, more documents, proving we're still together. And that is another 2.5 years. So at the end of this year is when that expires. And then I'm allowed to apply for indefinite leave to remain, which is going to be so nice to not have to do anything for a while. After I apply and hopefully receive the indefinite leave to remain, after that, I'm allowed to apply for citizenship as well, which I'm probably going to do. Having the dual citizenship would make life a lot easier, and when it comes to it, we'll deal with that. After all of those applications, moving expenses, lawyer expenses, all of those fees, NHS fees, everything, we're probably around 10,000 pounds in, let alone life expenses and everything else. So if you're planning on doing it, definitely save up as much as you possibly can. And plan ahead to know that you're going to have to jump through a lot of hoops. If you're doing the job visa, the work visa, it might be easier. I have no idea what that's like. But that was my experience, and it was not pleasant, but it meant that I could be here with the person I love. And the whole time I've been here has been like surreal and amazing. I imagine that it's just as stressful and expensive to do this in the US. So, it just depends where you want to live, I guess. Next question is from Gnome Runner 1293. Advice for a married couple moving to Scotland. So without knowing your circumstances, it's hard to give advice, but if you're from outside of the UK, you'll probably need to get some kind of visa if you want to stay for longer than 6 months. You are allowed to buy a house in Scotland if you're not a UK citizen. You can even get a UK mortgage, I think, but you probably pay way higher interest rates. Yeah, there's probably a lot you need to look into with that. But in terms of just general life advice, I think one of the most important things for anyone moving to any country, but I'm going to just speak from my experience here is be extremely respectful to locals. Don't move in and act like you own the place and know everything about everything. Do some research about Scottish history, learn about the clearances, learn about all of the different periods of time. And I think that will help you gain a natural respect for what the people here have gone through. As much as I love sharing the positive side of everything and the beauty of the Highlands, it's not just a playground to come and romp around in. It's a very amazing country with amazing people and a very textured history. So just get to know it. I guess this next question is kind of personal, but I think they were wondering about it in relation to moving here. So anyways, Erica asks, do you want to have children? And if so, would you raise them in Scotland or the US? Did you weigh your artistic freedom against having children? Well, that's easy for me to answer. I've never wanted children. And when I first met Sean, that was one of the first things we talked about once we realized we were serious, and he is also the same. So we both never ever plan on having children, and that's a good thing to know right off the bat. But yeah, no, it's never been interesting to me. Maybe it's kind of selfish because I just love pouring all of my time into art and photography and bettering myself and understanding the world and understanding people. And just, there are probably a lot of people who are thinking, oh, Sarah, you're going to regret it when you're older. You're going to wish you had kids. But that's also a very selfish mindset or a very personal mindset. Whoever's thinking that, that's your own perspective. There are a lot of people in the world who don't want kids, and that's okay. Two of my closest friends, it's a couple that lives in the US, are maybe 20 or 30 years older than me. They've never had kids, they've never wanted kids, and they are the happiest couple I've ever met. People come in all shapes and sizes and makes and models, and I do want a lot of cats. I think my life goals just align better with not having kids. Money is another part of it. Not that that ever drove the reason, but at the moment, whenever I have extra money, I love being able to give it to charities. Actually, I don't think I've mentioned it in my videos verbally, but the link has been in the description a lot. But if you go to the description, you'll find a link to Trees for Life. Trees for Life is an amazing nonprofit organization here in Scotland who are trying to rewild Scotland, the Highlands. So planting trees, protecting the wild areas, and hopefully restoring it to what it used to be, because a lot of the trees in Scotland have been cut down, unfortunately. And you probably notice in the videos, there's a lot of barren looking landscapes, even though it's majestic in its own way. There used to be a lot more woodlands here and a lot more wildlife and variety, and they're working on restoring a lot of the areas. So if you're interested, you can go donate. Every donation plants a tree. I have a little grove in my business's name, so we're growing the grove together. Okay, so quite a few people wanted to know, prior to moving, what did you think you'd miss the most? And then what did you actually miss? Well, I knew I'd miss friends and family, first of all. But before I moved here officially, I had been visiting off and on. So I was here for an accumulative a little over 6 months, I think. So I had a pretty good idea of what it was like. So before I moved, I thought I'm gonna miss the sun because I'm from Colorado and Colorado gets over 300 days of sun. It's a whole different lifestyle. Moving here, that was a bit of a shock, especially in the winter. We do get a fair bit of really gorgeous days. Actually, the last 2 summers have been amazing. I was outside in my t-shirt all the time in the sun. We also get a ton of rain. The weather is probably the biggest shock overall. It might be different if you're from a country that's very wet and rainy. But Colorado and Scotland are extremely different. So yeah, that was the thing I thought I'd miss the most. And I was right. I miss the sun. Another thing I actually miss is Mexican food. And I know that's really silly and little, but when I lived in Denver, I could drive down any road and I would have access to the most amazing Mexican food. I miss that. Okay, next question. A couple people asked, what has been your favorite thing about living in Scotland? Probably the rain, the moisture. And I know I just said I miss the sun, and that's like contradicting. And when I moved to Scotland, it wasn't long before I realized like it's so mild. Lots of rain, moisture, very high humidity. It means that we still get the green fields and the thick moss and all of the lush foliage, the lush undergrowth throughout the year, even in winter. So I've been here for 5 years, but I still find that mind blowing. I grew up in upstate New York and Colorado, and it's like brown and gray and white in the winter, whereas here we have so much green. Overall, there's less extremes, less hot extremes, less cold extremes. Throughout the year, it feels like I can be outside just comfortable more than when I lived in Denver. I think for me, for my lifestyle, because I love to be outside painting, photographing, filming, hiking, all of that. Like, if you like to be outside, Scotland is actually amazing. Yes, you do need to plan for rain. I've gone on dozens, if not hundreds, of hikes where I just had a t-shirt. I didn't even have to bring an umbrella or anything, because a lot of times when it rains, it's like a quick shower and then it passes through. I guess being where we are, or maybe the island thing, I don't know, but weather moves really fast. Like, you can see the rain clouds coming, you see them passing over you, and then they're gone. So it's a really amazing climate for being outside. Oh, another thing I miss is snow. We don't get a lot of snow here. When we do, it's magical, and I love it so much. Okay, a few people were asking, as you explore more of Scotland, is there any other region you'd like to live, like the West Coast, any of the cities, or the Outer Hebrides? I actually haven't been to the Outer Hebrides yet. I really, really want to go. I was already looking at ferry tickets for this year, this coming summer. So we'll see. We've always talked about living on the West Coast. But here's the thing. West Coast equals midges. The midge of terror. Another question I think was asking, what's your least favorite thing about Scotland? And that is the midgie, the midge. I'm like itching just thinking about it. But the midgie is this teeny tiny little biting insect. They come in swarms and they are relentless and vicious. And in the Highlands in general, in the warmer months, you have to have a midge net, if not like a midge suit. And if you're camping, you have to set up your tent and just hide inside. Otherwise, you're eaten alive. So they can completely ruin a hike. They can completely ruin a camping trip. The midge is one of the worst things, and the West Coast is notorious for it. So as much as I love the West Coast, I honestly don't think I could live there for that reason. A lot of people talk about how if it wasn't for the midge, Scotland's Highlands would be overrun by humans, because obviously it's so insanely beautiful. Everyone wants to be there, up in the mountains, on the coast, everything. It's just so gorgeous. But in the middle of summer, like in the height of tourist season, the midge comes out. I think it really makes people think twice about living there. I mean, obviously you're still gonna go hiking if you want to go hiking. You just wear the midge net and get on with life. But here where I am in Maury County on the coast, in this little pocket, it's like magical because we don't really have midges. I can go out in the middle of summer in a t-shirt and just sit and paint and not worry about it at all, which is absolute luxury. So I wouldn't want to live on the West Coast full time, I don't think. But one idea I've thrown around is that someday I would love to have a little cabin or something on the West Coast in one of my favorite places, or on Skye or something, and be able to visit it probably in the off season. So autumn, winter, spring. And I actually love going to the West Coast and Skye in those seasons. And then in the summer, live somewhere here or somewhere where there's just not midges. Because again, I paint outside all the time in the warm months, and it's part of my job. It's part of my livelihood. And yeah, being able to do it without covering myself in a net is kind of important. Oh, Val asks, what is it like to live in Scotland? Are the people nice? Going back to give you some context, when I first moved to Scotland, I lived in Inverness. We had a little place kind of just outside the city centre, so it was like, in the city. And then we moved to the countryside near Dingwall, and now we live in Murray County in the countryside. So for quite a few years now, we've lived in a more rural area in the countryside, and definitely prefer that. I'm not a city girl at all. In terms of what it's like to live here, it feels very similar to like living somewhere where rural in America. Uh, the countryside is the countryside, and lots of farms, lots of little shops, lots of local crafters, and, that kind of life. I love it. Maybe some of the differences would be the currency, obviously. You're driving on the left side of the road. So the steering wheel is on the right side of the car. That definitely takes some getting used to. Different traffic lights, roundabouts. Public transportation is actually pretty decent in the Highlands. It takes a while to get anywhere on the bus. And in recent years, there's been a lot of strikes for the train. So I wouldn't rely on that all the time. Yeah, it just feels very similar to any kind of rural area I've been in before. And yes, the people are nice. Like I said at the beginning, if you have respect for the country you're in and the people and their history, you'll get on just fine. And in my experience, people really like to share the cool things about where they live. So if I run into a local and they know I'm a hiker, they'll be like, oh, you have to go check out this trail. Or, ooh, have you seen this yet? And, they get excited about it. And I love that. And they'll offer suggestions about cool shops to go see or things to visit. Of course, there are exceptions. You'll probably meet grumpy people wherever you go in the world. But in general, I've had really great experiences with people here. And honestly, it's a very eclectic population. Like half the people I meet are from other countries, especially if you live in a city. When we lived in Inverness, I would say over half the people I met had an accent from another country. It just depends where you live, I guess. If you're really rural, maybe in the West Coast or the islands, it's probably mostly Scottish people, maybe English, and some people on the Outer Hebrides speak Gaelic as their first language, so there's that as well. But in general, pretty much everywhere I've been, people are very friendly and helpful. I don't know if it's like an icebreaker that I have an American accent and people are, every time I meet someone, they're like, are you from America or Canada? And so it kind of gets us talking, and maybe that opens people up and makes them more friendly. But okay, next question from Jdan5793. How cold does it get there? Are bills and groceries expensive? Least favorite thing? I answered the least favorite thing. So it gets pretty cold. Last month, we had some snowstorms and it was below -10 degrees Celsius. This month, it's very mild. It's like right now, it's around 3 or 4 degrees Celsius. So it kind of fluctuates, but I think it feels very mild. I guess it's partially because I'm from Colorado. And there's a lot of snow in Colorado. There can be some really extreme temperatures there. So to me, it seems very mild here. Honestly, after a few years of living here, I think I've acclimated pretty well. I have more insulation nowadays anyway. And yeah, it's definitely manageable. And are bills and groceries expensive? They're getting worse, honestly. Like ever since Brexit, it started getting worse. And now it's pretty bad. Fuel prices are bad. Gas and electricity bills are really bad. We have a wood stove, so using wood for heat definitely helps us save money on our bills. I do buy a lot of groceries, so groceries for me are kind of expensive because I'm vegetarian. I eat a lot of fresh veggie and fruit and healthy stuff, so that automatically makes the bill go up. Next question. Sketchbook Scheming asks, easy hikes for new visitors? I could suggest them all day long, but I recommend going on this website called Walk Highlands. It is the best hiking website. They have a huge database of hikes. You can search by map or by region. You can then within each of those regions, there's like a list of easy to difficult hikes. and they have like photos of what the hikes are like. It's just the absolute best website. But pretty much everywhere you go, there's going to be an easy hike option and a hard version. So like if you're near the mountains, if you're in Glencoe, there's definitely hikes that are just like on the flatter bits, and there's hikes that go straight up the mountains. So, you can decide based on where you are. Okay, moving on to the final section, which is more related to art and my business. So Rebecca asks, would you consider teaching a watercolor workshop? Absolutely. That's one of my big business goals. It's why my business name is not just Sarah Burns Art. It's Sarah Burns Studio, because my goal someday is to own a little studio, like a cabin or something like that, somewhere pretty. And we go off on a different painting trip each day. We do a little tutorial, a little painting, share some meals together, have a good time. That's the dream. How magical does that sound? I would probably also incorporate photography. Not that I consider myself an expert, but I know enough to like help someone if they're new to it. And I know a lot of good photography spots, so that would be part of it as well. Kelly's Art Throb asks, did the change in geography from Colorado to Scotland change how you approach your art? Before I moved to Scotland, I was only painting for about 2 years. I was brand new to this journey. Luckily, though, I had very early on in my journey started my habit of painting outside. So in Denver, I would go hiking, I would go to the botanic gardens, and I would just paint outside as much as possible. So that was it was part of my practice. And so when I moved to Scotland, the climate definitely affected it. It's been more of a challenge that in that sense, but I also just had to learn about the different regions. Here on the coast, it's very different to the West Coast. Colors are different, the atmosphere is different, so all of that plays a role in the artwork itself. Out of the two, like choosing between Colorado and Scotland, I definitely love painting Scotland more. Maybe because there's more variety. I also had to learn about tide clocks. The tide comes in and goes out, and you can get into trouble if you're not careful. So there's little things like that I had to pick up on. Last question, Jay Shelby asks, will you participate in the Scottish Landscape Awards 2023? I'm not a huge fan of those things. And I just never agree with the judges' decisions, like ever. And I just think it would be a frustrating experience. And lastly, I had a couple people ask, now that the Murray Coast Trail is done, what's next on my channel? Which is kind of an interesting question because, well, my channel isn't about one thing, but yes, I am doing this coastal journey, right? So I want to hike or bike or kayak or whatever around the coast of Scotland throughout my life. It'll take a long time. And I've just done the Murray Coast, 55 miles, something like that. And I do have to decide which direction I want to go in next. But I'm not going to do a continuous line around all of Scotland. I would get too bored with that. There's probably going to be times when I do long stretches and camp, definitely not in the winter. But there's also going to be other times where I'm like, hey, let's go to Skye and do this 50-mile section, and then come back. But next, I think I'm going to walk towards Inverness. And then probably after that, I might go up towards the other side of the coast, towards Aberdeen. There's some big cliffs out there, so that's going to be cool. But I don't know if I want to do that in the winter because of the very, very icy wind from the north. But besides all that, I am so busy with my business, which is a good thing. Definitely a good thing. And I'm really enjoying keeping up the momentum with that. My Patreon keeps me really busy. So while the energy is here, I am embracing it. I do want to thank the 4,630 something subscribers that have joined my channel. That is kind of crazy. Thank you all for your support, your encouragement, your comments, your questions. It's been amazing to share my excitement and love for Scotland with so many people. And yeah, I'm looking forward to keeping that going. Thank you all. I hope you're enjoying your new year so far, and I will see you all soon. Take care.